The rhythmic beeping of machines, the antiseptic smell burning my nostrils, the weight of the oxygen mask pressed against my face like a plastic cage. I'd been in Desert Valley Medical Center's ICU for 3 days after the accident, my body fighting to heal from injuries that should have killed me. The doctors said I was lucky. The truck that ran the red light had missed my vital organs by inches. But lying there unable to move without sending lightning through my ribs, luck felt like a cruel joke. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My phone buzzed against the metal bedside table. The Thompson Family Updates group chat had been quiet since the accident, just the usual check-ins from relatives asking about my recovery. But this notification was different. The preview showed Jessica's name and a photo attachment. My sister, who'd been oddly absent from my bedside, finally reaching out. I fumbled for the phone with my good hand, wincing as the movement pulled at the IV line. The photo loaded slowly over the hospital's terrible Wi-Fi, but when it came into focus, my blood pressure monitor started beeping faster. Jessica stood on a pristine beach, cocktail in hand, designer sunglasses reflecting the Mexican sun. The caption read, "Living my best life in Cabo. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself." The timestamp showed it was taken yesterday. While I was lying here fighting pneumonia complications, my sister was apparently living it up at some luxury resort. I scrolled up through the chat history, looking for any mention of a planned trip. Nothing. Not a single word about vacation plans, travel funds, or time off work. Jessica worked at a mid-level marketing firm and lived paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment. A trip to Cabo would have cost her months of savings. Another photo popped up in the chat. This time Jessica was in what looked like a 5-star restaurant, an enormous seafood platter in front of her, champagne flute raised to the camera. Dinner at Casa del Mar. The lobster here is incredible. The restaurant's logo was visible in the background, and I recognized it from travel magazines. Casa del Mar was one of those places where dinner for one could easily cost $300. My chest tightened, and not from the injuries. Something wasn't right. I tried to push away the suspicious thoughts creeping into my mind. Maybe she'd saved up. Maybe she'd gotten a bonus at work. Maybe someone else was paying. But the photos kept coming, each one more extravagant than the last. A massage at the resort spa, shopping bags from high-end boutiques, a sunset boat tour with bottles of champagne scattered across a white deck. I called her number. It went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Jessica. I'm probably having too much fun to answer, so leave a message." The cheerful tone made my stomach turn. I hung up without speaking. The next morning brought more photos. Jessica at breakfast, a spread that could have fed a family. Jessica by the infinity pool, wearing a bikini that still had tags visible in one corner of the frame. Jessica getting her nails done at what the location tag showed was the resort's premium salon. Each image felt like a slap across my face as I lay there unable to even sit up without assistance. Nurse Patricia Wells came in for the morning medication check. She'd been taking care of me since the first day, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands who never made me feel like a burden despite my constant need for help. "How are we feeling today, Maya?" she asked, adjusting the bed to help me sit up slightly. "Confused," I admitted. "My sister's on vacation, and I can't figure out how she afforded it." Patricia glanced at my phone, where another photo notification had just appeared. "Sometimes people make poor financial choices when they're stressed," she said gently. "Maybe she needed to get away after your accident." Maybe, but the word felt hollow in my mouth. I'd known Jessica her whole life. She was many things, impulsive, dramatic, occasionally selfish, but she wasn't the type to blow money on luxury vacations while her sister was in the hospital. Unless she wasn't spending her own money. The thought hit me like ice water in my veins. My purse, where was my purse? "Patricia, do you know what happened to my belongings?" "My purse, my wallet." She checked the chart at the foot of my bed. "Everything should be in the patient belongings locker. Would you like me to get them?" When she returned with the sealed plastic bag, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unzip it. My wallet was there, but something felt wrong. The leather was positioned differently than I remembered, and the credit cards weren't in their usual order. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, praying that my suspicions were unfounded. The screen loaded and my heart stopped. Transaction after transaction, all from Mexico, all charged to my credit cards over the past 4 days. Casa del Mar Resort and Spa, $2,847 for 3 nights in a luxury suite. Marina Yacht Club, $680 for a sunset cruise with premium package. Coral Reef Spa, $340 for a couple's massage treatment. Designer boutique after designer boutique, restaurants, bars, activities. The total was approaching $8,000. My sister had stolen my credit cards and was using them to fund her vacation while I fought for my life in intensive care. Patricia must have seen the color drain from my face. Maya, what is it? She's using my credit cards, I whispered. My sister is in Mexico spending my money while I'm dying in here. The nurse leaned closer, her expression shifting from concern to something harder. Are you certain? I showed her the banking app, scrolling through the endless charges. Look at the timestamps. Every single one matches up with her photos. She took my cards while I was unconscious and flew to Mexico for a vacation on my dime.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the screen. You need to call your bank immediately. And probably the police. But I couldn't move. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it had paralyzed me. Jessica hadn't just stolen my credit cards. She'd waited until I was at my most vulnerable, unconscious and fighting for my life, and then helped herself to my financial security. While family members were supposed to be praying for my recovery, she was planning her getaway. The phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time Jessica was in a hot tub, surrounded by what looked like other vacationers, holding up a margarita. The caption read, "New friends and endless summer vibes." This trip is exactly what I needed. What she needed. While I was hooked to machines that were keeping me alive, she was getting exactly what she needed. I called my bank's fraud hotline, my voice shaking as I explained the situation to a patient representative named Marcus. I'm in the hospital ICU, and someone has been using my credit cards in Mexico without my permission. I'm sorry to hear about your situation, ma'am. Can you confirm your identity and account information? After 5 minutes of security questions, Marcus pulled up my account. I can see the charges you're referring to. They do appear to be concentrated in Cabo San Lucas over the past 4 days. The total fraudulent amount appears to be $7,923 so far. So far, my voice cracked. Ma'am, there are pending charges that haven't cleared yet. The total could reach over $10,000 by the time her trip ends. Her trip, he'd said her trip, but I hadn't specified the gender of the person using my cards. How did you know it was a woman? Marcus paused. I apologize, I shouldn't have assumed. Do you have any idea who might have access to your cards? My sister, she must have taken them from my wallet while I was unconscious. In cases of family member fraud, you'll need to file a police report as well as our internal fraud claim. I can freeze the accounts immediately to prevent further charges, but you'll need to press charges if you want the fraudulent transactions reversed. Press charges, against my own sister. The words felt impossible to say out loud. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, mixing with the constant beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of hospital activity. My chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, but inside I felt like I was drowning. Another message popped up in the family chat, this one from our cousin Mike in Denver. Jess, those vacation photos look amazing. How did you swing such a fancy trip? Jessica's response came quickly, just been saving up and decided to treat myself. Life's too short, you know, saving up. The lie was so casual, so effortless, that it made me nauseous. I scrolled through the chat history, looking at everyone's responses to her photos. Aunt Linda, you deserve it, honey. Uncle David, living the dream. Our grandmother, such a beautiful girl, enjoying life. They all thought she'd earned this somehow, that she deserved this luxury, while I lay broken in a hospital bed. None of them knew that every cocktail, every massage, every sunset dinner was being charged to credit cards stolen from their unconscious niece. I called Uncle David, my father's brother, who'd always been the most level-headed person in our family. He picked up on the second ring. Maya, how are you feeling, sweetheart? We've all been so worried. I've been better. I paused, trying to find the words. David, I need to tell you something about Jessica's trip. Oh, that vacation in Mexico. Good for her. I was surprised she could afford something so fancy, but maybe she got a deal or saved up more than we realized. She didn't save up. She's using my credit cards. She took them from my wallet while I was unconscious and has charged almost $8,000 to my accounts. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, David's voice came back, much quieter. Are you absolutely certain? I walked him through everything. The timing of the charges, the matching locations in her photos, the fact that she'd never mentioned having money for a vacation. I just got off the phone with my bank. They're freezing the accounts, but she's already spent almost $8,000 of my money. Jesus Christ, David's voice was tight with anger. Maya, this is theft. This is fraud. You have to report this to the police. She's my sister. She's a criminal who stole from you while you were fighting for your life in the hospital. Blood doesn't give her the right to destroy your finances while you're vulnerable. He was right, but the words still felt impossible to accept. What if the family takes her side? What if they think I'm being vindictive? Then they're not the family you deserve. Maya, listen to me. I've been watching those photos for days, and something felt off from the beginning. Jessica works retail, lives in a studio apartment, drives a 15-year-old Honda. A trip like that would cost her 3 months' salary. I should have questioned it immediately. You couldn't have known, but I could have asked the right questions. And now I'm asking them of you. Are you going to let her get away with this? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Was I going to let her get away with this? Was I going to lie here in my hospital bed and watch her spend me while I recovered from injuries that had nearly killed me? No, I said, and for the first time in days, my voice sounded steady. I'm not. Good. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me figure out exactly how much she's stolen and document everything. And I need someone I can trust to be my advocate while I'm stuck in this bed. You've got it. I'm driving down from Flagstaff tonight. After we hung up, I opened the group chat again and took screenshots of every single photo Jessica had posted, noting the timestamps and locations. Then I opened my banking apps and did the same for every fraudulent charge. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Patricia came back for the evening medication check and found me hunched over my phone, despite the pain it caused. How are you holding up? I'm pressing charges, I said. My sister stole my credit cards and went on vacation while I was unconscious. I'm done pretending this is some kind of misunderstanding. Patricia nodded approvingly.
Good.
I've seen a lot of family dynamics in this job, and what your sister did isn't love or concern. It's predatory. You think I'm doing the right thing. I think you're doing the only thing. Someone who would steal from a family member in intensive care isn't someone who's going to change without consequences. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's smiling face in those photos, cocktail in hand, living her best life on my stolen money. The betrayal ran deeper than the theft itself. It was the timing, the calculation, the complete lack of concern for my well-being, while she celebrated her windfall. The next morning brought a new photo. Jessica at the resort's breakfast buffet, a plate piled high with exotic fruits and pastries. Last day in paradise. This trip has been absolutely magical. Last day, which meant she'd be coming home soon, probably expecting to slip back into normal life, as if nothing had happened. But I was ready for her now. Uncle David had driven through the night and was in the hospital parking lot. The police report was filed. My bank had issued new cards and initiated the fraud investigation, and I had documented every lie, every stolen dollar, every moment of her betrayal. When Jessica Thompson walked off that plane from Cabo San Lucas, she was going to discover that her magical vacation had come with a price she hadn't anticipated. The storm was coming, and I was no longer the victim lying helpless in a hospital bed. I was the one holding the lightning. Part 2, The System Betrayal Discovery. Uncle David arrived at 7 in the morning, still wearing the clothes he'd driven in from Flagstaff. His face was grim as he pulled up a chair beside my bed, and I could see the anger simmering behind his usually calm demeanor. He'd brought a laptop and a legal pad covered in his neat handwriting. I've been digging all night, he said, without preamble. This is bigger than just Jessica taking your credit. I struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through my ribs. What do you mean? David opened his laptop and turned it toward me. The screen showed Jessica's social media profiles, but not the vacation photos I'd been seeing in our family chat. These were different posts, older ones that painted a picture I hadn't been paying attention to. Photos from expensive restaurants dating back 3 months. Designer clothes I'd never seen her wear. A new car I didn't know she'd bought. Look at the timeline, David said, pointing to the date. She's been living way above her means for months. The Mexico trip isn't the beginning of this, Maya, it's the escalation. My throat went dry. You think she's been using my cards before? I think she's been using someone's money, and given what we know now, yours seems like the most likely source. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo he'd screenshotted. This is from 6 weeks ago. Jessica at that new steakhouse downtown, celebrating her promotions with a bottle of wine that costs more than most people's car payments. I stared at the image. She got promoted. I called her manager yesterday. She's never been promoted. In fact, she's been written up twice in the past month for tardiness and poor performance. Maya, there is no extra money. There's no savings account. There's no legitimate source for any of this spending. The monitors around my bed started beeping faster as my heart rate spiked. How long do you think this has been going on? David's expression darkened. Based on what I can see from her social media, at least 3 months. Possibly longer. 3 months. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks at my accounting firm, saving every penny for the house I'd been planning to buy, Jessica had been systematically draining my accounts. The violation felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. There's more, David continued. I reached out to Detective Lauren Hayes, in the Financial Crimes Unit. She's seen cases like this before, and she says family member fraud is often part of a larger pattern. People who steal from relatives usually have other schemes running simultaneously. What kind of schemes? Identity theft, fake employment, credit applications using family members' information. Hayes wants to run a full credit check on you to see if Jessica has opened any accounts in your name. The thought made me dizzy. You think she might have taken out loans? Credit cards. I think someone who would steal from their unconscious sister in the hospital is capable of anything. David's voice was steady, but I could hear the fury underneath. Maya, this isn't impulsive behavior. This is calculated, systematic theft that's been going on for months. A knock at the door interrupted us. Nurse Patricia entered, followed by a woman in a dark blue suit who looked like she meant business. The stranger had short blonde hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of posture that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room. Maya Thompson. I'm Detective Lauren Hayes, Financial Crimes Unit. She showed her badge before pulling out a small notebook. Your uncle called me last night about your sister's unauthorized use of your credit cards. I nodded suddenly, feeling very small in the hospital bed. She's in Mexico right now, spending my money. So I've been told. I've reviewed the preliminary information your uncle provided, and I have to say, this case has some unusual elements that concern me. Hayes pulled up a chair and opened her notebook. Family member fraud cases usually involve small amounts, opportunistic spending. But the pattern here suggests something more sophisticated. What do you mean? Your sister has been making charges for months, but she's been careful to keep them under certain thresholds that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. The Mexico trip is actually the first time she's deviated from her established pattern. Hayes looked up from her notes. That suggests either desperation or escalation. David leaned forward. Detective, we were just discussing the possibility that Jessica might have committed other forms of fraud using Maya's identity. Which is exactly what I want to investigate. Hayes turned back to me. With your permission, I'd like to run a comprehensive credit check and financial audit. We'll look for any accounts, loans or credit applications that you didn't authorize. The thought of discovering more violations of my trust was terrifying, but I knew I had to face whatever Jessica had done. Yes, do whatever you need to do. Hayes pulled out a tablet and began typing. I'm also going to need you to walk me through your relationship with your sister. How much access did she have to your personal information? Your social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name. She's my sister. She's known all that information since we were kids. The words felt stupid as I said them. Of course she'd known my personal details. I'd trusted her completely. When did you last change your online banking passwords? I thought back, feeling increasingly foolish. Maybe 2 years ago, when the bank sent out that notice about updating security. Hayes made a note, and Jessica would have had opportunities to observe you entering those passwords. We used to live together until about a year ago. She helped me set up my online banking when I was recovering from surgery a few years back. Each admission felt like another nail in my coffin of naivety. Surgery, appendectomy. I was laid up for a week, and Jessica helped me pay bills online, manage my accounts. I thought she was being helpful. David and Hayes exchanged a look that made my stomach clench. Maya, David said gently, that might have been when this all started. You think she's been stealing from me for years. I think she learned how to access your accounts years ago, and has been using that access gradually, carefully until now. Hayes was typing rapidly on her tablet. The good news is that if this has been going on for an extended period, there will be a substantial paper trail. Financial predators get comfortable, and comfortable criminals get sloppy. A new thought occurred to me, one so obvious I couldn't believe it had taken this long to surface. My emergency contact. Jessica is my emergency contact for everything. The hospital, my bank, my credit cards. Hayes looked up sharply. Meaning when I was brought in unconscious, she probably had legal access to my wallet, my belongings, everything. The hospital would have called her, and she would have been the one handling my personal effects. She was here. I realized the memory coming back in fragments. The first night after my surgery, she was here when I woke up. She said she'd been taking care of my things, making sure everything was secure. Patricia, who had been quietly listening, spoke up for the first time. She was here for about an hour that first night. I remember because she spent a lot of time at the nurse's station, asking questions about patient belongings, visitor policies, how long you might be unconscious. The pieces were falling into place, with sickening clarity. Jessica hadn't come to the hospital out of concern for my well-being. She'd come to assess her opportunities, to gain legitimate access to my wallet and credit cards, under the guise of being a worried sister. She planned this, I whispered. She saw my accident as an opportunity. Hayes nodded grimly. Family member fraud often involves this kind of opportunistic timing. A medical emergency, a death in the family, any situation where the victim is vulnerable and distracted. But she's my sister. We grew up together. We shared a room until we were teenagers. I could hear the desperation in my own voice, still trying to make sense of a betrayal that defied everything I thought I knew about the person closest to me. Maya, David said gently, sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who know exactly how to do it. Hayes was making more notes. I need to ask some difficult questions about Jessica's recent behavior. Have you noticed any changes in her spending habits, lifestyle, social circle? I thought back over the past few months, trying to remember details I'd dismissed at the time. She's been going out more. New clothes, new friends. She said she was dating someone who had money, someone who liked to treat her. Did you ever meet this person?
Yeah.
No, she was always vague about him. Said he was private, didn't like meeting family. The excuse sounded pathetic in retrospect. Because he doesn't exist, David said flatly. The mysterious wealthy boyfriend was her cover story for living beyond her means. Hayes leaned forward. Maya, I need you to think carefully. Has Jessica ever asked you for money? Loans, gifts, anything? She asked to borrow $500 about 2 months ago. Said she had an emergency car repair. I paused, remembering. But she never paid me back. When I asked about it, she said she'd pay me next month, then the month after that. She was testing your boundaries, Hayes explained. Seeing how much she could take without you making a big deal about it. When you didn't press her for repayment, she escalated to taking what she wanted without asking. The tablet in Hayes' hands chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen, and her expression grew even more serious. Maya, I've just received the preliminary results of your credit check. My heart hammered against my ribs. What did you find? 3 credit cards opened in your name over the past 8 months. Total available credit of $42,000. Current balances totaling $37,000. The room started spinning. $37,000. The accounts show regular charges for rent, utilities, groceries, entertainment, travel. Someone has been using these cards to fund their entire lifestyle. David was gripping the arm of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Jessica's been living off Maya's credit for almost a year. It appears so. The addresses on the accounts are Jessica's current apartment, but all the personal information matches Maya's social security number, employment, and financial history. I couldn't breathe. The oxygen mask felt like it was suffocating me instead of helping. $37,000 in debt that I'd never authorized, never even known about. My credit score was probably destroyed. My savings meant nothing against that kind of debt. There's more, Hayes continued, her voice professional but not unkind. 2 personal loans totaling $18,000, both taken out in the past 6 months. And an apartment lease that was co-signed using your information. What apartment lease? A luxury apartment in Scottsdale. 2-bedroom, pool, garage, monthly rent is $2,800. I stared at her in disbelief. Jessica lives in a studio apartment downtown. Not anymore, apparently. According to this lease, she moved into the Scottsdale place 3 months ago. The betrayal kept growing, layer after layer of deception and theft. Jessica hadn't just stolen my credit cards for a vacation, she'd been systematically stealing my identity and my financial future for the better part of a year, building herself an entirely new life funded by my destroyed credit. How is this possible? I asked. Don't they verify this information when someone applies for credit? They verify the social security number, employment history, and financial statement.
Oh!
Hayes explained, all of which belong to you. Jessica just used her own name and photo while claiming your financial identity. David was pacing now, his anger barely contained. So she's been living in luxury for months, while Maya worked herself to death saving money, and none of us knew because she was smart enough to keep up appearances with her old life. The vacation photos make more sense now. Hayes said, this isn't someone who suddenly found money for a luxury trip. This is someone who's been living a luxury lifestyle for months, and got comfortable enough to flaunt it. Patricia had been listening to everything with growing horror. This is why she seemed so calm when she was here that first night. She wasn't worried about Maya's condition, she was excited about the opportunity. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She was probably hoping I wouldn't wake up. The room went silent, except for the steady beeping of my monitors. Hayes closed her tablet and looked directly at me. Maya, what your sister has done goes far beyond family member fraud. This is identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and potentially dozens of other federal crimes. We're talking about over $50,000 in theft and fraudulent debt. What happens now? Now we build a case that puts her in federal prison for a very long time. Hayes stood up, her expression hard as stone. And we make sure she never has the opportunity to do this to anyone else. Part 3. The moral crossroads. The weight of the discovery had settled over the room, like a toxic cloud. $50,000. The number kept echoing in my head as I stared at the ceiling, trying to process the magnitude of Jessica's betrayal. My sister hadn't just stolen from me, she'd systematically destroyed my financial life, while I worked 70-hour weeks, denying myself small luxuries to save for a future that no longer existed. Detective Hayes had left to begin the formal investigation, but not before handing me a thick folder of documentation. Account statements, credit applications, loan documents, all bearing my personal information, but Jessica's signature. Each page was another violation, another lie, another moment when she'd chosen to steal from me instead of asking for help. Uncle David sat in the corner, making phone calls to family members. I could hear fragments of his conversations through the morphine haze. She's been stealing Maya's identity for almost a year. No, this isn't a misunderstanding. $50,000, Linda. $50,000, Linda. $50,000. The reactions were predictable. Shock, disbelief, demands for proof. Our family had always protected Jessica, made excuses for her
Impulsiveness. Her struggles with responsibility. The idea that sweet, scattered Jessica was actually a calculated criminal was too much for most of them to accept immediately. Your Aunt Linda wants to talk to you, David said, holding out his phone. I took the phone reluctantly. Linda had helped raise us after our parents died, and her opinion carried weight with the entire family. Maya, honey,
David's telling me some very serious things about Jessica. Linda's voice was careful, measured. I need to hear this from you directly. I walked her through everything. The vacation photos, the credit card charges, the secret apartment, the fraudulent loans. With each detail, Linda's breathing became more shallow, more strained. "Dear God," she whispered when I finished. "I gave her $2,000 last month. She said it was for you, for medical bills from your accident." Another theft. Even while I was lying unconscious in the hospital, Jessica had been using my condition to extract money from our relatives. "Aunt Linda, I haven't had any medical bills yet. My insurance covers everything. She showed me pictures of you in the hospital, said the insurance wasn't enough, that you needed help with copays and prescriptions." Linda's voice cracked. "I wrote her a check immediately. I thought I was helping you. She's been using my accident to steal from everyone who cares about me." The silence stretched between us before Linda spoke again, her voice different now, harder. "What do you need me to do? I need the family to know the truth, all of it, because when the police arrest her there are going to be people who think I'm overreacting, being vindictive. I need them to understand that this isn't about family loyalty anymore. You're pressing charges." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "She stole $50,000 from me, Linda. She's destroyed my credit, my savings, my financial future. And she did it while I was unconscious in a hospital bed." "I know, honey. I know," Linda sighed heavily. "It's just going to tear the family apart." And there it was. The choice I'd been dreading since Detective Hayes had laid out the scope of Jessica's crimes. I could report everything to the police, press charges, and watch my sister go to federal prison while our family chose sides and relationships shattered. Or I could try to handle this privately, demand repayment, hope that Jessica would finally face consequences without destroying everyone around us. But even as I considered the second option, I knew it was impossible. Jessica had been stealing from me for almost a year without any guilt or remorse. She'd used my near-death experience as an opportunity to escalate her theft. Someone that calculating, that ruthless, wasn't going to be reformed by a family confrontation. "Linda, if I don't press charges, she's going to do this again, maybe not to me, but to someone else. A boyfriend, a roommate, another family member. This isn't impulsive behavior, this is a criminal pattern." "I understand, I do, it's just she's going to go to prison, Maya. Real prison, for years. And if she doesn't, someone else is going to lose everything the way I have." After I hung up, David sat back down beside my bed. "That was the right thing to say. Was it? Because I feel like I'm choosing between destroying my sister and protecting strangers I've never met." "You're choosing between enabling a criminal and stopping one. Maya, Jessica made her choice when she decided to steal from you. Everything that happens next is a consequence of her decisions, not yours." Dr. Martinez came in for his afternoon rounds, checking my charts and examining the healing surgical sites. He'd been my primary physician since the accident, and I'd grown comfortable with his straightforward bedside manner. "How are you feeling today, Maya? Your vitals look stable. Physically, I'm improving. Emotionally, I'm a wreck." I told him about Jessica's theft, the fraudulent accounts, the scope of the betrayal. Dr. Martinez listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as I detailed each violation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of family dynamics during medical crises. What your sister did is among the most predatory behaviors I've encountered. You think I'm doing the right thing by pressing charges. I think you're doing the only thing. Someone who would steal from their unconscious sister has crossed a line that can't be uncrossed with apologies or promises to do better." He paused, checking my chart again. "There's something else you should know. The day after your accident, Jessica came to the nurse's station asking detailed questions about your condition, your prognosis, how long you might be sedated." My blood chilled. "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know if you were expected to recover fully, if there might be lasting cognitive effects, how long before you'd be able to manage your own affairs again." Dr. Martinez met my eyes. At the time I thought she was just a concerned sister. In retrospect, those questions suggest she was planning something that depended on your incapacitation. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Jessica hadn't just stolen my credit cards impulsively when the opportunity arose. She'd been calculating how long she could use them before I was conscious enough to discover the theft. "She was hoping for permanent brain damage," I whispered. I can't make that determination, but her questions were unusual for a family member genuinely concerned about recovery. David had gone pale. Maya, we need to tell Detective Hayes about this conversation. Already planning to, Dr. Martinez said. This information could be relevant to establishing premeditation. After he left, I called Detective Hayes and relayed Dr. Martinez's observations. Her response was immediate and sharp. Maya, this changes the scope of our investigation significantly. If Jessica was planning to exploit your incapacitation for an extended period, we're looking at charges of conspiracy and potentially attempted financial murder. Financial murder. Deliberately trying to destroy someone's financial life to the point where recovery becomes impossible. It's rare, but it carries serious federal penalties. The phone buzzed in my hand. A new message in the Thompson Family Updates group chat. A photo of Jessica on the plane, champagne glass raised, smiling broadly, heading home from the most amazing trip. Can't wait to see everyone. She was coming back. In a few hours, Jessica would land in Phoenix, probably expecting to slip back into her routine as if nothing had happened. She had no idea that her entire criminal enterprise had been discovered and documented. No idea that Detective Hayes was waiting with arrest warrants. No idea that the family she'd stolen from was no longer going to protect her. I screenshot the photo and sent it to Hayes with a message. She's coming home. The response came immediately. We're ready. Uncle David looked at the photo over my shoulder. She looks happy. She should. She just spent a week living in luxury on money she stole from her unconscious sister. Maya, are you prepared for what happens when she's arrested? The phone calls, the family pressure, the guilt trips. I thought about Linda's reaction, the pain in her voice when she realized the scope of Jessica's betrayal. I thought about our grandmother, who'd always favored Jessica, who would see the arrest as a family failure rather than justice for criminal behavior. I thought about cousins and uncles who would pressure me to drop the charges, to find a way to work things out privately. I'm prepared to lose people who think I should let this go, I said finally. Because anyone who thinks stealing $50,000 from your unconscious sister is forgivable, isn't someone I need in my life. David nodded approvingly. Good. Because you're about to find out who your real family is. The sun was setting outside my hospital window, casting long shadows across the floor. Somewhere above the clouds, Jessica was flying home to face consequences she couldn't imagine. The evidence was overwhelming, the financial damage was documented, and the criminal charges were being prepared. But the hardest part wasn't going to be watching her get arrested. It was going to be explaining to people who'd known us both our entire lives, that the sister they'd loved and protected was actually a predator who'd been systematically destroying my life for almost a year. The choice was made though. Jessica had made it when she decided that my financial security was less important than her luxury lifestyle. When she decided that my trust was worth less than designer clothes and expensive dinners. When she decided that my medical crisis was an opportunity instead of a tragedy. Now she was going to learn that choices have consequences, and some lines, once crossed, change everything forever. Part 4. The point of no return. Jessica's flight was scheduled to land at 9:47 p.m. Detective Hayes had texted me the details along with a plan that felt both surreal and inevitable. Airport security would allow Jessica to collect her luggage and exit the secure area before making the arrest. They wanted her to feel safe, comfortable, unprepared for what was waiting. She'll probably take an Uber or taxi home, Hayes had explained during her earlier visit. We'll take her into custody before she leaves the airport. Clean, public. No opportunity for her to destroy evidence or contact accomplices. Accomplices. The word suggested that Jessica's theft might involve other people, friends or romantic partners who'd helped her spend my money, or provided cover for her crimes. The thought that there might be an entire network of people who'd knowingly participated in my financial destruction was almost too much to process. Uncle David had driven home to Flagstaff to pack a bag and settle his affairs. He'd be staying in Phoenix for as long as it took to see this through, which could be weeks or months depending on how Jessica decided to handle the charges. I was grateful for his support, but also aware that his presence was going to signal to the rest of the family that this was serious, irrevocable. Nurse Patricia came in with my evening medications. Over the past few days, she'd become more than just my caregiver. She'd become a witness to the unraveling of my family, a steady presence while everything I thought I knew about my life collapsed and reformed. "How are you holding up?" she asked, checking my IV and adjusting the bed positioning. "I keep waiting to feel guilty about what's going to happen to Jessica tonight."
And nothing. I keep thinking I should feel sorry for her, or conflicted about sending my own sister to prison. But all I feel is angry. Patricia sat down in the visitor's chair, something she rarely did during her rounds. Maya, in my 20 years of nursing, I've seen families in crisis more times than I can count. Medical emergencies reveal people's true character. Some family members sacrifice everything to help their loved ones. Others see opportunity in vulnerability. Which kind was Jessica? The kind who asked detailed questions about your prognosis while showing no interest in your comfort or recovery. The kind who spent more time at the nurse's station learning about patient belongings policies than at your bedside. Patricia's voice was matter-of-fact, but I could hear the underlying anger. Your sister didn't come to the hospital as a concerned family member. She came as a predator. The word hit hard because it felt accurate. Jessica hadn't been my sister during those critical first days. She'd been someone calculating how to exploit my vulnerability for maximum gain. My phone rang. Detective Hayes. Maya, Jessica's flight has landed. She's currently in baggage claim. Are you prepared for what happens next? What do you need from me? Nothing tonight. We have everything we need to make the arrest. But once she's in custody, her lawyer is going to contact you. There will be pressure to drop the charges, to work out some kind of family arrangement. I understand. Do you? Because the pressure is going to be intense. Family members, mutual friends, probably your sister herself. They're going to paint you as vindictive, unforgiving, someone who's destroying a family over money. I thought about the $50,000 in debt I hadn't incurred, the destroyed credit score, the luxury apartment Jessica had been living in while I worked myself to exhaustion. It's not about money, it's about the fact that she tried to destroy my life while I was fighting for it. Good. Remember that when people start calling you tonight, people are going to call me tonight. Maya, your sister is about to be arrested on federal fraud charges. That's going to generate phone calls, text messages, social media posts. People are going to demand explanations, take sides, pressure you to change your mind. Are you ready for that? I wasn't. The medical crisis had been manageable, because it was just about my body healing, my recovery progressing. But this was going to be about relationships, family dynamics, years of shared history being re-examined in light of Jessica's crimes. What should I tell people? The truth. Your sister committed federal crimes against you while you were unconscious in the hospital. Everything that happens after that is a consequence of her choices, not yours. After Hayes hung up, I stared at my phone, waiting for it to explode with notifications. The arrest would happen soon, and once it did, the carefully constructed narrative Jessica had built around her lifestyle would collapse. People who'd admired her vacation photos would learn they were looking at evidence of federal crimes. Family members, who'd been impressed by her apparent success, would discover it was all built on stolen money. The first call came at 10:23 p.m. Cousin Mike from Denver. Maya, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from Aunt Linda, saying Jessica's been arrested for stealing your credit cards. Not just my credit cards. She's been using my identity to open accounts, take out loans, fund an entire lifestyle, for almost a year. That's impossible. Jessica doesn't have the financial sophistication to pull off something like that. The comment stung because it revealed how little attention anyone had been paying to Jessica's spending patterns. Mike, she's been living in a luxury apartment in Scottsdale for 3 months. She's charged over $50,000 to accounts opened in my name. How did you think she was affording all of this? Silence. Then I don't know. I assumed she'd gotten a better job, or was dating someone with money. She told everyone she was dating someone with money. The money was mine, stolen from accounts she opened using my social security number and employment information. Jesus Christ. Mike's voice was quiet now. Maya, I'm sorry. We should have asked more questions. Yes, you should have. But questioning Jessica's financial situation was never anyone's priority. What happens now? Now she goes to federal prison for fraud and identity theft. And I spend the next year trying to rebuild the credit she destroyed. The second call came 20 minutes later. Our grandmother. Maya, dear Linda tells me there's been some kind of misunderstanding about Jessica and your credit cards. There's no misunderstanding, Grandma. Jessica stole my identity, and has been using it to commit fraud for almost a year. Surely this is something that can be worked out within the family. Jessica made a mistake, but sending her to prison seems excessive. She stole $50,000 from me while I was unconscious in the hospital. That's not a mistake, it's a felony. But she's your sister. Family forgives family. Family doesn't steal from family while they're fighting for their life in intensive care. The conversation ended badly, with my grandmother crying and accusing me of being vengeful and unforgiving. It was the first of many similar conversations I'd have over the coming weeks, each one a test of my resolve to see this through, despite the family pressure. The third call was from Jessica herself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Her voice was small, shaky, nothing like the confident woman in the vacation photos. I need to explain. Explain what? How you spent $50,000 of my money while I was unconscious. How you've been living in a luxury apartment funded by accounts you opened in my name. How you used my medical crisis as an opportunity to escalate your theft. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to pay it all back. With what money, Jessica? You work retail, you make minimum wage. How were you planning to pay back $50,000? I was working on a plan. I was going to get a better job, work extra hours. You were going to work extra hours to pay back money you stole from your unconscious sister. Do you understand how insane that sounds? Maya, please, if you drop the charges, I'll figure out a way to make this right. You can't make this right. You destroyed my credit, my savings, my trust. You used my medical emergency as an opportunity to steal from me. There is no coming back from that. I'm your sister. No, you're not. My sister wouldn't steal from me while I was fighting for my life. My sister would have been worried about my recovery, not calculating how long I'd be unconscious. What are you talking about? Dr. Martinez told me about your questions that first night. You weren't asking about my condition because you were concerned. You were asking because you needed to know how long you could steal from me before I woke up. The silence stretched between us before Jessica spoke again, her voice different now, flatter. I didn't know you were going to find out so quickly. So you admit it. You were planning to steal from me while I was unconscious. I was planning to borrow money and pay it back before you recovered. The vacation was supposed to be a one-time thing, except you'd already been stealing from me for almost a year before my accident. Another silence. Then how did you find out about the other accounts? Because I'm not an idiot, Jessica. Because I asked the right people the right questions. And because you got careless and comfortable. Please, I'm begging you. Drop the charges, and I'll do whatever you want. I'll go to counseling. I'll get a second job. I'll move back home with Grandma. You're not listening to me. This isn't about punishment or rehabilitation. This is about the fact that you committed federal crimes against me while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. You don't get to negotiate your way out of that. I'm your sister, she said again, but the words sounded hollow now. You were my sister. Now you're just someone who destroyed my life for designer clothes and vacation photos. I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Within minutes, text messages started coming from numbers I didn't recognize. Jessica had clearly moved on to using other people's phones to continue her campaign of manipulation and guilt. This is Jessica's friend Amanda. She's hysterical. Please reconsider pressing charges. This is Ryan. Jessica told me what happened and she's willing to work out a payment plan. Jessica is in jail crying. She says you won't talk to her. This is cruel. I blocked each number as the messages came in, but they kept coming from new numbers. Jessica had apparently mobilized her entire social network to pressure me into dropping the charges. The messages revealed something interesting though. Jessica had been telling people that this was a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting to a small mistake, that family should forgive family. She hadn't told anyone the real scope of her crimes, the months of identity theft, the systematic destruction of my financial life. I screenshot the messages and sent them to Detective Hayes with a note. Jessica is conducting a harassment campaign using third parties. She's also apparently lied to her friends about the scope of her crimes. Hayes' response was immediate. This supports our case for premeditation and lack of remorse. Save everything. By midnight I'd received 17 phone calls and 34 text messages from people demanding that I reconsider pressing charges against Jessica. Not one of them had asked how I was feeling, how I was coping with the betrayal, or what I needed to recover from what Jessica had done to me. The message was clear. My pain mattered less than Jessica's consequences. My financial destruction was less important than her freedom. My trust, my security, my future were all acceptable casualties in the name of family unity. But I was done being an acceptable casualty. Jessica had made her choice when she decided to steal from me. Now I was making mine. Part 5. The Strategic Alliance Building. The morning brought a different kind of quiet to my hospital room. The frantic phone calls and text messages had finally stopped around 3 a.m., leaving behind a stillness that felt like the eye of a hurricane. I knew it was temporary, that the pressure campaign would resume once Jessica's friends and supporters regrouped. But for now I had space to think clearly about what came next. Detective Hayes arrived at 8 a.m. with coffee and a thick folder of documents. She looked like she'd been working all night, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "How are you holding up after last night's circus?" she asked, settling into the visitor's chair. "Tired, angry, but certain." I accepted the coffee gratefully. "What happened after you arrested her?" "Your sister spent the night in federal holding. She's been assigned a public defender since she claims she can't afford private counsel, which is interesting considering she's been living in a luxury apartment and taking international vacations." Hayes opened her folder and pulled out several photographs. "These are from the search of Jessica's apartment in Scottsdale. We executed the warrant at 6 a.m. this morning." The photos showed a lifestyle I'd never seen Jessica live before. Expensive furniture, designer clothing still with tags attached, jewelry that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The kitchen counters were covered with shopping bags from high-end stores, and the refrigerator was stocked with imported delicacies that Jessica had never shown interest in before. She was living like someone making six figures, I observed. More than that, we found receipts and bank statements that show she was spending at a rate that would require an annual income of over $200,000. Her actual job pays about $28,000. Hayes pulled out another set of documents. "This is where it gets interesting. We also found detailed records that Jessica had been keeping of her spending. Spreadsheets, receipts organized by date and amount, even photos of her purchases. She was documenting her crimes." Your sister wasn't just stealing from you impulsively. She was running a sophisticated financial fraud operation and keeping meticulous records of every dollar she spent." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Jessica hadn't been overcome by temptation or making impulsive mistakes. She'd been operating like a business, tracking her theft and spending with the same attention to detail that I used in my legitimate accounting work. "There's more," Hayes continued. "We found evidence that Jessica was researching other potential victims. She had files on 3 of your cousins, including their social security numbers, employment information and financial profiles. She was planning to steal from other family members. It appears so. She had particularly detailed information about your cousin Mark in California. His credit score, his salary at the tech company, even his home address and car registration. Mark, my successful cousin who worked for a major software company and frequently posted about his achievements on social media. Jessica had been watching him the same way she'd been watching me, calculating his value as a potential victim. How did she get their information? Family gatherings, social media, casual conversation. You'd be surprised how much personal information people share without thinking about it." Hayes showed me a notebook filled with Jessica's handwriting. She had a whole system for collecting and organizing financial intelligence on family members. I stared at the notebook, recognizing Jessica's neat handwriting documenting our relatives' financial vulnerabilities like a predator studying prey. Under my name, she'd written detailed notes about my work schedule, my savings goals, my habit of checking bank statements only once a month. She'd been studying me for months, identifying the perfect opportunity to exploit my trust. "Detective, this isn't just theft. She was running a criminal enterprise targeting our own family, which is exactly what I'm going to argue to the federal prosecutor. Your sister wasn't just committing fraud. She was operating a family identity theft ring. That's a much more serious charge with much harsher penalties." Dr. Martinez knocked and entered, carrying my latest test results. "Good morning, Maya. I have some excellent news about your recovery progress." He nodded professionally to Detective Hayes before focusing on my charts. "Your lung function has improved significantly, and the surgical sites are healing ahead of schedule. I think we can start discussing discharge planning." "How soon?" "If your progress continues, possibly by the end of the week. You'll need home care for the first few weeks, but nothing that would prevent you from handling your affairs." Hayes leaned forward. "Maya, that timing actually works well for our case. Jessica's preliminary hearing is scheduled for next Monday. Having you present and clearly recovered would be powerful testimony about her motivations." "What do you mean?" "Jessica's defense is going to argue that she was emotionally distraught about your accident, that her actions were impulsive decisions made while she was grieving and panicked. Having you appear healthy and articulate destroys that narrative. Dr. Martinez looked uncomfortable. Detective, I'm not sure it's appropriate to discuss legal strategy during a medical consultation. Actually, doctor, your testimony could be crucial to this case, Hayes replied. You witnessed Jessica's behavior during Maya's most critical period. Her questions about Maya's prognosis, her lack of interest in the medical care, her focus on patient belongings policies. I've already documented those observations in my notes. Would you be willing to testify about them in court? Dr. Martinez glanced at me. If Maya consents and it would help ensure justice, yes. The word justice felt heavy in the room. This wasn't just about recovering my stolen money anymore. It was about stopping someone who'd been systematically targeting vulnerable family members, documenting their weaknesses, and preparing to exploit them. Detective Hayes, I want to know everything. Every account she opened, every dollar she stole, every family member she was targeting. I want to understand the full scope of what Jessica was planning. Hayes pulled out a tablet and opened a detailed spreadsheet. Based on the evidence we seized, Jessica opened 7 fraudulent accounts in your name over the past 10 months. Credit cards, personal loans, even a car loan for a vehicle she's been driving. What car? A 2023 BMW sedan. Fully loaded. Monthly payments of $640. It's registered in your name, but she's been making the payments with other fraudulent accounts. I closed my eyes, feeling dizzy despite the medication. How much does she owe on the car? $38,000. The number added to my growing tally of Jessica's theft. Between the credit cards, loans, apartment lease and car, she'd destroyed my financial life to the tune of nearly $90,000. Maya, there's something else you need to know. Hayes said gently. We found evidence that Jessica was corresponding with someone else about her activities. Someone who might have been advising her or helping her target victims. Who? We're still investigating, but the communications suggest she wasn't working alone. Someone with more experience in financial fraud has been guiding her activities. The thought that Jessica had been working with experienced criminals made everything worse. She hadn't just made bad decisions in a moment of weakness. She'd been recruited into or sought out a criminal network that specialized in family member fraud. Do you think this person helped her target me specifically? It's possible. Family member fraud is often part of larger criminal enterprises. Professional identity thieves recruit people with access to family financial information. My phone rang. Uncle David. Maya, I'm back in Phoenix. Are you ready for some good news? I could use some. I've been in contact with an attorney named Michael Foster. He specializes in financial fraud cases and has agreed to represent you in the civil proceedings against Jessica. Civil proceedings. The criminal case will handle the jail time, but you'll need separate legal action
to recover your money and repair your credit. Foster thinks you have an excellent case for full recovery plus damages. Hayes looked interested. Michael Foster is one of the best financial recovery attorneys in the state. If he's taking Maya's case, that's significant. He wants to meet with you as soon as you're discharged, David continued. He's already begun preliminary work on asset recovery and credit repair. What does asset recovery mean? It means seizing everything Jessica bought with your stolen money. The apartment in Scottsdale, the BMW, the designer clothes, the jewelry. Everything purchased with fraudulent accounts gets liquidated to pay back your debts. The idea of Jessica losing her luxury lifestyle felt like justice, but it also felt surreal. For months she'd been living better than I was while I worked myself to exhaustion saving money. Now her entire fabricated life was going to disappear, leaving her with nothing but criminal charges and destroyed relationships. David, there's something you need to know. Detective Hayes found evidence that Jessica was planning to target other family members. She had detailed financial information on Mark and possibly others. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, David spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. She was going to steal from Mark too. She had his social security number, his salary information, even his address. Detective Hayes thinks she was building a target list. Jesus Christ. Maya, this changes everything. We need to warn the entire family that their personal information might be compromised. Hayes nodded approvingly. That's exactly what we need to do. Family member fraud often involves multiple victims once the perpetrator becomes comfortable with the process. I'll start making calls, David said. Everyone needs to check their credit reports immediately and consider freezing their accounts until we know the full scope of Jessica's activities. After David hung up, Hayes closed her folder and looked at me seriously. Maya, you need to understand that what we've discovered makes this a federal case with significant implications. Jessica isn't just going to face fraud charges, she's potentially looking at conspiracy, racketeering, and organized crime charges. How much time could she get? If convicted on all charges, anywhere from 15 to 30 years in federal prison. 30 years. The number seemed impossible to process. Jessica was 26 years old. A 30-year sentence would mean she wouldn't be released until she was in her 50s, assuming she served the full term. Detective, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Pressing charges against my own sister? Hayes was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Maya, in my 12 years investigating financial crimes, I've seen hundreds of cases of family member fraud. Most victims choose not to press charges because they hope the situation can be resolved privately. And does that work? Never. Not once. Family member fraud is different from other crimes because it exploits the deepest levels of trust. People who steal from their own families don't reform through forgiveness and second chances. They escalate. She leaned forward, her expression intense. Your sister didn't just steal your money, Maya. She studied you, planned her attack, documented her crimes, and prepared to move on to other victims. That's not someone who made a mistake. That's someone who chose to become a predator. But she's my sister. She was your sister. The person who stole your identity while you were unconscious in the hospital is a criminal who happens to share your DNA. The distinction felt important. Jessica, the sister, had died the moment she decided to use my medical crisis as an opportunity for theft. The person in federal custody was Jessica, the criminal, and she deserved to be treated as such. What happens next? Next, we build the strongest possible case to ensure she never has the opportunity to do this to anyone else. We document every crime, trace every dollar, and make sure the judge understands that this wasn't impulsive behavior but calculated criminal enterprise. Hayes stood up and gathered her materials. Maya, you have a choice to make. You can continue to think of Jessica as your troubled sister who made bad decisions, or you can accept that she's a criminal who targeted you specifically because you trusted her. What do you recommend? I recommend you treat her the same way you'd treat any stranger who stole $90,000 from you while you were unconscious in the hospital. After Hayes left, I sat in the quiet of my room, processing everything I'd learned. Jessica hadn't just betrayed me, she'd been operating a criminal enterprise that targeted our entire family. The luxury lifestyle, the international vacations, the designer clothes, all of it had been funded by systematic identity theft that was escalating toward other victims. The phone calls from family members would start again soon, people demanding that I drop the charges and handle this privately. But now I had information they didn't have. Jessica wasn't just someone who'd made a mistake with my credit cards. She was someone who'd been documenting our relatives' financial vulnerabilities and preparing to steal from them. The choice was becoming clearer. I could protect Jessica and enable her to continue victimizing our family, or I could stop her permanently and accept the consequences to our relationships. When I thought about Mark in California, unknowingly vulnerable to Jessica's planned theft, the choice became obvious. I picked up my phone and called Detective Hayes. Detective, I want to make sure you have everything you need to keep Jessica in federal prison for as long as possible. What do you need from me? I need you to help me contact every family member Jessica was targeting. I want them to know what she was planning, and I want their testimony to be part of the case against her. Maya, that's going to destroy your family relationships permanently. Good. Anyone who thinks I should enable Jessica's criminal behavior isn't family I need to keep. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff, but it also felt like the first honest choice I'd made since discovering Jessica's betrayal. I was done protecting someone who'd been planning to destroy our entire family one victim at a time. Jessica had built her criminal enterprise on the assumption that family loyalty would protect her from consequences. It was time to prove her wrong. The federal courthouse in downtown Phoenix was a monument to justice that felt both intimidating and reassuring as Uncle David wheeled me through the security checkpoint. 3 weeks had passed since my discharge from the hospital, 3 weeks of physical therapy, legal meetings, and family conversations that had torn our relationships apart in ways I was still processing. Michael Foster, my attorney, met us in the hallway outside courtroom 7B. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made you understand why Detective Hayes had recommended him so highly. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd become more than just my legal counsel. He'd become the architect of Jessica's complete financial destruction. Maya, are you ready for this? Foster asked, his voice gentle but focused. Today's hearing is going to be intense. Jessica's public defender is going to paint her as a victim of circumstances. Someone who made desperate decisions while emotionally overwhelmed by your accident. But that's not what happened. We know that and we have the evidence to prove it. But be prepared for her to look different today. Prison jumpsuits have a way of making criminals look sympathetic to judges who don't know the full story. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but it was packed with people whose presence told the story of how completely Jessica's crimes had fractured our family. Uncle David sat behind me, solid and supportive. Detective Hayes was at the prosecutor's table with Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Klein, surrounded by boxes of evidence that represented months of investigation. On the other side of the courtroom, Aunt Linda sat with our grandmother, both of them looking like they were attending a funeral. They'd made their choice clear over the past weeks. Despite the evidence, despite the scope of Jessica's crimes, they believed I was destroying the family by refusing to drop the charges. Behind them sat Jessica's former friends, the ones who'd participated in the harassment campaign during her first night in custody. Amanda Price, who'd sent me dozens of texts calling me heartless. Ryan Clark, who tried to convince me that Jessica's fraud was just a cry for help. Their presence felt like a demonstration of loyalty to someone who'd systematically stolen from her own family. The door at the back of the courtroom opened, and Jessica appeared in an orange federal jumpsuit, flanked by two marshals. Foster had been right about the visual impact. The designer clothes were gone, the perfect makeup replaced by the harsh reality of federal detention. She looked smaller somehow, younger, more vulnerable than the confident woman who'd posted vacation photos while spending my stolen money. But when her eyes found mine across the courtroom, I saw something that made my stomach clench. Not remorse, not shame. Anger. Pure focused anger directed at me for refusing to protect her from the consequences of her crimes. Judge Margaret Chen called the court to order, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Klein rose to present the prosecution's case. For the next hour, she methodically dismantled the image of Jessica as an impulsive young woman who'd made desperate mistakes. Your Honor, the defendant didn't commit these crimes in a moment of panic or emotional distress. She committed them as part of a calculated long-term criminal enterprise that targeted vulnerable family members using sophisticated identity theft techniques. Klein presented the evidence piece by piece. The spreadsheets Jessica had maintained tracking her fraudulent spending. The research files on other family members. The correspondence with someone who appeared to be coaching her criminal activities. The timeline showing that Jessica's crimes had escalated during my hospitalization, not begun during it. The defendant used her sister's medical crisis not as a wake-up call to seek help, but as an opportunity to accelerate her criminal activities. Hospital records show that she visited the intensive care unit not to comfort her unconscious sister, but to ask detailed questions about patient belongings policies and the expected duration of sedation. Jessica's public defender, a tired-looking man named Robert Hughes, tried to present an alternative narrative. Jessica was struggling financially, emotionally damaged by childhood trauma, desperate to help with my medical expenses. She'd made terrible decisions, but they were born from love and panic, not criminal intent. Hughes was compelling in his way, painting Jessica as someone who'd lost her way rather than someone who'd chosen a criminal path. He focused on her youth, her lack of prior criminal history, the emotional devastation of seeing her sister nearly die in a car accident. But then Klein called her first witness, and Hughes' narrative began to crumble. Dr. Martinez took the stand and described Jessica's behavior during my hospitalization with clinical precision. Her questions about my prognosis hadn't been those of a concerned sister. They'd been those of someone calculating how long she could exploit my incapacitation without detection. The defendant showed no interest in her sister's comfort or recovery. She didn't ask about pain management, therapy options, or discharge planning. She asked about patient belongings storage, visitor access policies, and whether cognitive function might be permanently impaired. Detective Hayes followed, presenting evidence of Jessica's systematic approach to financial fraud. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as Hayes described the research files on other family members, the documentation of their financial vulnerabilities, the apparent coaching from an experienced criminal. Your Honor, this wasn't opportunistic family member fraud. This was organized criminal activity targeting multiple victims based on their trust relationships with the defendant. But the most devastating testimony came from Mark, my cousin from California, who'd flown in to testify about Jessica's attempts to steal his identity.
He'd discovered fraudulent credit applications in his name only after Detective Hayes had contacted him to warn about Jessica's activities. She had my social security number, my employment information, even details about my mortgage and car payments. Mark testified. Information she could only have obtained through family conversations where I trusted her with personal details. Mark's voice cracked as he described the violation of discovering that someone he'd known since childhood had been calculating how to destroy his financial life. We shared holidays, family dinners, personal celebrations. While I was treating her like family, she was treating me like a target. Jessica's supporters in the gallery shifted uncomfortably as the scope of her crimes became clear. These weren't impulsive mistakes born from desperation. They were calculated attacks on people who'd loved and trusted her. When it was time for Jessica to speak, Hughes advised her to make a brief statement accepting responsibility, while emphasizing her remorse and commitment to making amends. But Jessica had other plans. She stood at the defense table, and for a moment I saw a flash of the entitled confidence that had carried her through months of criminal activity. When she spoke, her voice was steady, defiant. "Your Honor, I want to say that everything that's happened has been blown completely out of proportion. My sister is treating this like I murdered someone, when all I did was borrow money from accounts that had both our names on them." Klein shot to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is misrepresenting the evidence. None of the fraudulent accounts had Maya Thompson's authorization." But Jessica continued, her voice rising. "Maya has always been jealous of me, of my social life, my relationships. She worked all the time and never had any fun, and she couldn't stand that I was finally living the life I deserved." The words hit me like a physical blow. Even now, facing federal prison, Jessica couldn't acknowledge what she'd done. In her mind, I was still the villain for refusing to enable her crimes. "I was going to pay everything back," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But Maya decided to destroy our entire family instead of working this out privately like normal people do." Judge Chen's expression had gone cold. "Miss Thompson, are you stating that you believe your actions were justified?" "I'm stating that my sister has turned a family financial issue into a federal case because she's vindictive and controlling." Hughes tried to interrupt, but Jessica kept talking, her composure completely gone now. "She's always had to be the perfect one, the responsible one, the one everyone praised. She couldn't stand that I finally had something good in my life. Something good that you funded by stealing nearly $90,000 from your unconscious sister. It wasn't stealing. We're family. She would have given me the money if I'd asked." "Did you ask?" The question hung in the air like a trap that Jessica had walked into willingly. "That's not the point. Miss Thompson, you've just admitted in open court that you knew your sister would have helped you financially, but you chose to steal from her instead. Can you explain why?" Jessica's facade cracked completely, because she would have wanted to control how I spent it. She would have made me prove I deserved it, made me feel guilty for wanting nice things. "So you decided to steal her identity and destroy her credit to avoid having an uncomfortable conversation about money." "I decided to take what I needed without having to beg for it." The courtroom was dead silent. Jessica had just confessed to federal crimes while simultaneously justifying them, destroying any possibility of leniency through a demonstration of complete lack of remorse. Judge Chen didn't deliberate long. When she returned to the bench, her expression was uncompromising. "Miss Thompson, your testimony today has been more revealing than all the evidence presented by the prosecution. You've demonstrated not only a complete lack of remorse for your crimes, but a fundamental inability to understand why systematically stealing from your unconscious sister constitutes criminal behavior." Jessica's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "The evidence shows that you committed sophisticated financial fraud over a period of nearly 1 year, targeting multiple family members, and documenting your criminal activities with the precision of a professional identity thief. Your actions during your sister's medical crisis show a level of calculated exploitation that this court finds deeply disturbing." Judge Chen continued, her voice growing sharper with each word. "You used your sister's trust, her medical emergency, and your access to family financial information to commit crimes that will take years to fully remediate. Your testimony today shows that you view these actions as justified and would likely repeat them if given the opportunity. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 22 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You will also be required to pay full restitution of $87,000, plus damages and legal fees." 22 years. The number echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Jessica's supporters gasped, and I heard Aunt Linda start crying behind me. Jessica herself stood motionless, staring at the judge as if the words hadn't registered. Furthermore, Judge Chen continued, I am ordering that all assets purchased with fraudulent funds be immediately seized and liquidated to begin restitution payments. This includes the apartment lease, the vehicle, and all personal property purchased with stolen money. Jessica finally seemed to understand what was happening. You can't do this. You can't take everything I have. Miss Thompson, everything you have was purchased with money stolen from your family. This court is simply returning stolen property to its rightful owners. The marshals moved forward to escort Jessica from the courtroom. As they reached for her arms, she turned toward me, her face twisted with rage and desperation. Maya, you did this. You destroyed our family. You ruined my life. I met her eyes across the courtroom, feeling nothing but exhaustion and finality. No, Jessica, you did this when you decided to steal from me while I was unconscious in the hospital. I'm your sister. You were my sister. Now you're just someone who committed federal crimes against me. The marshals led her away, her protests echoing down the hallway until the courtroom doors closed with a sound like thunder. The silence that followed felt different from any quiet I'd experienced. Not empty, but clean. Foster turned to me with something like admiration in his eyes. Maya, how do you feel? I considered the question carefully. How did I feel? Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Not even relieved, exactly, just finished. I feel like justice was served. Outside the courthouse, Uncle David and I sat on a bench in the late afternoon sun. The city moved around us with the busy indifference of daily life, people rushing to appointments and obligations that suddenly seemed precious in their normalcy. Any regrets? David asked. I thought about the family relationships that were probably irreparable now. Aunt Linda and grandmother would never forgive me for sending Jessica to prison. Cousins would choose sides based on their own comfort with family loyalty versus personal accountability. Holiday gatherings would be tense, complicated affairs for years to come. I regret that it was necessary. I said finally. I regret that Jessica chose to become someone who would steal from her unconscious sister. I regret that protecting myself meant losing people I love. But you don't regret pressing charges. No, because if I hadn't, she would have destroyed Mark's life the same way she destroyed mine. And then someone else after that. David nodded slowly. You know your father would have been proud of you. Would he? He always said that family loyalty doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their choices. It means loving them enough to let them face those consequences. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun moved lower in the sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Hayes. Asset seizure complete. Jessica's luxury apartment and BMW have been recovered. Liquidation should cover about 60% of restitution. 60%. It was a start, though I knew I'd be dealing with the financial aftermath of Jessica's crimes for years to come. My credit was still destroyed, my savings still depleted, my sense of financial security still shattered. But I was alive. I'd survived both the accident that had nearly killed me and the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. I'd chosen justice over family loyalty, accountability over enabling, truth over comfortable lies. As we walked back to David's truck, I thought about Jessica starting her first night of a 22-year sentence. She'd be in her 40s when she was released, and she'd carry the conviction for the rest of her life. The designer clothes were gone, the luxury apartment was gone, the BMW was gone. All that remained was the consequences of her choices. I'd given her every opportunity to confess, to show remorse, to demonstrate some understanding of the pain she'd caused. Instead, she'd used her final moment of freedom to blame me for her crimes and justify her betrayal. Some people would say I'd been too harsh, that family should forgive family, that Jessica deserved compassion and second chances. But those people hadn't woken up in intensive care to discover that their sister had used their medical crisis as an opportunity for theft. They hadn't spent weeks documenting the scope of systematic financial abuse while fighting to recover from injuries that should have killed them. Family loyalty works both ways. Jessica had chosen to break that loyalty when she decided my unconscious body was an opportunity rather than a tragedy. I'd chosen to honor it by making sure she never had the chance to hurt anyone else the way she'd hurt me. The setting sun painted the Phoenix skyline in shades of gold and red as we drove home. Somewhere behind us, Jessica was beginning a sentence that would last longer than our entire relationship had existed. Somewhere ahead of me was the slow work of rebuilding everything she'd destroyed. But for the first time since that phone call in Syria, I felt like I could breathe fully. The war was over, justice had been served, and the person who'd tried to destroy my life while I fought for it was finally facing consequences that matched her crimes. In the end, that was enough. 6 months after Jessica's sentencing, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, making coffee in silence that felt like peace instead of emptiness. The morning light streamed through windows that faced east, toward a future I was finally ready to build without looking over my shoulder for the next betrayal. The apartment was modest, nothing like the luxury Jessica had stolen her way into, but every piece of furniture, every dish, every book had been earned honestly. After months of credit repair, asset recovery, and legal proceedings, I was finally financially stable again, though the scars of Jessica's theft would take years to fully heal. My phone rang, interrupting the quiet. Attorney Michael Foster's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with the cautious optimism that had become my default emotional state. Maya, I have news about the restitution recovery. Are you sitting down? Should I be? We've recovered another significant portion of what Jessica stole from you. The federal investigators found additional assets we didn't know about during the initial seizure. Foster explained that Jessica had been more sophisticated in her criminal enterprise than even the original investigation had revealed. Hidden bank accounts, cryptocurrency investments, even a storage unit filled with luxury goods she'd planned to sell for cash. The total recovery was approaching $75,000 of the $87,000 she'd stolen. There's more, Foster continued. The federal investigation into Jessica's criminal network led to the arrest of 3 other people who were running similar family member fraud schemes. Apparently, Jessica wasn't just a victim of criminal recruitment, she was actively recruiting others. The news should have shocked me, but after everything I'd learned about Jessica's calculated approach to crime, it felt like the logical conclusion of her criminal evolution. She hadn't just been stealing from family members, she'd been teaching others how to do the same. Who was she recruiting? College students mostly. People with access to their family's financial information but struggling with debt. Jessica was taking a percentage of what they stole in exchange for providing the technical knowledge and emotional manipulation techniques. I set down my coffee cup, feeling dizzy despite being seated. She was running a criminal training program. The FBI is calling it one of the most sophisticated family fraud rings they've encountered. Jessica was the operational leader, teaching others how to exploit family trust relationships for financial gain. The conversation ended with Foster promising to keep me updated on the ongoing federal investigation, but I barely heard the details. I was still processing the revelation that Jessica hadn't just been a criminal, she'd been a criminal mastermind who'd built an organization around destroying families. An hour later, Detective Hayes called with additional information that filled in the gaps Foster had left. The federal investigation had uncovered evidence that Jessica had been planning to expand her criminal operations significantly after my recovery. My accident had been an opportunity for immediate financial gain, but her long-term plan had been much more ambitious. Maya, she had detailed files on over 20 potential victims across 3 states. Family members, college roommates, co-workers, even romantic partners. She was building a comprehensive identity theft operation using people's trust relationships against them. How many people did she actually steal from? Besides you and the attempted theft from Mark, we've identified 11 confirmed victims. The total theft across all cases approaches $400,000. $400,000 stolen from people who trusted Jessica enough to share personal information with her. Students who thought she was helping them understand financial aid applications. Co-workers who'd confided about their financial struggles. Romantic partners who'd believed she cared about their futures. Detective, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course, do you think Jessica always planned to target me specifically, or was I just convenient? Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Maya, based on the evidence we've recovered, I think Jessica identified you as her primary target months before your accident. You had excellent credit, substantial savings, regular income, and most importantly, you trusted her completely. So the accident was just timing. The accident was an opportunity she'd been preparing for. When it happened, she already had all your personal information, she already understood your financial habits, and she already had access to your accounts. She just escalated her timeline. The conversation left me feeling hollow in a way I hadn't experienced since the early days of discovering Jessica's betrayal. It was one thing to learn that she'd stolen from me impulsively during a crisis. It was another to understand that she'd been planning my financial destruction for months while pretending to be my loving sister. That afternoon, I drove to Desert Valley Medical Center for a follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez. The hospital had become a strange touchstone for me, a place where I'd nearly died, but also where I'd found the strength to fight back against someone who tried to destroy my life. Dr. Martinez reviewed my latest test results with obvious satisfaction. "Maya, your recovery has been remarkable. Physically, you're completely healed from the accident. The surgical sites have healed perfectly, your lung function is normal, and your mobility is fully restored. What about psychologically? That's harder to measure, but you seem to have processed the trauma of both the accident and your sister's betrayal in a healthy way. You're not carrying anger or bitterness that would interfere with your ability to move forward." I thought about his assessment as I walked through the hospital corridors afterward. Was I angry? Yes, but it was a clean anger directed at Jessica's choices rather than a poisonous
resentment that would consume my own life. Was I bitter? Sometimes, but more about the time and energy required to rebuild what she'd destroyed than about the loss itself. Nurse Patricia was working the afternoon shift in the ICU, and she stopped when she saw me in the hallway. "Maya, you look wonderful. How are you doing?" "Better every day. I wanted to thank you again for everything you did during those first few days. I don't think I ever properly expressed how much your support meant." Patricia smiled, but her expression grew serious. "Maya, I need to tell you something. After your sister's arrest made the news, 3 other families contacted the hospital about similar situations. Patients who'd been unconscious or sedated while family members asked suspicious questions about belongings and financial policies. Are you saying this is a common crime?" "I'm saying Jessica wasn't the first person to see a medical emergency as an opportunity for theft. Hospital security has implemented new protocols for family access to patient belongings because of what happened to you." The thought that Jessica's crime had been common enough to require policy changes was both disturbing and oddly comforting. At least my experience had led to protections for other vulnerable patients. As I drove home, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Maya Thompson, this is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a journalist with the Arizona Republic. I'm working on a story about family member fraud, and I understand you were the victim of a particularly sophisticated case. I don't really want to talk to reporters about this. I understand, and I'm not looking for sensationalism. I'm working on an investigative piece about the rise in family member identity theft, and law enforcement officials have told me your case represents a new evolution in this type of crime." I pulled over to the side of the road, considering her request. "What kind of story are you writing?" "A warning story. Something that might help other people recognize the signs before they become victims. The Financial Crimes Unit says family member fraud is increasing dramatically, especially cases involving medical emergencies and family crises." Walsh explained that she'd been investigating a pattern of crimes similar to Jessica's, cases where criminals used family trust relationships to commit sophisticated identity theft. My case had become a reference point for law enforcement because of the scope of Jessica's operation and the documentation they'd recovered. "Maya, I know this is personal and painful, but your story could prevent other families from going through what you experienced. What would you need from me?" "Just an interview about how the crime was discovered, how it affected you, and what you'd want other people to know about protecting themselves from family member fraud." I agreed to meet with Walsh the following week, partly because Detective Hayes had endorsed the idea, but mostly because I'd learned something important during Jessica's trial. Silence protects criminals. The reason Jessica had been so successful for so long was that her victims were embarrassed, confused, and reluctant to seek help. 2 days later, Uncle David called with news that shifted my perspective on everything that had happened. "Maya, I just got off the phone with Mark in California. He wanted you to know that your case helped them catch Jessica's criminal partner." "What do you mean?" "The person who was coaching Jessica, the one the FBI was looking for. Mark's testimony helped them identify someone who'd been running similar operations in multiple states. They arrested him yesterday." David explained that the criminal Jessica had been working with was a former banking executive who developed a system for recruiting people with access to family financial information. He'd been operating for over 5 years, building a network of criminals who specialized in exploiting trust relationships. "Maya, the FBI estimates that your decision to press charges helped them shut down a criminal enterprise that was stealing millions of dollars from families across the country. I just wanted Jessica to face consequences for what she did to me." And by doing that, you stopped a criminal organization that was destroying dozens of families. The ripple effects of your courage go far beyond just your case. The conversation left me thinking about choice and consequence in ways I'd never considered before. When I decided to press charges against Jessica, I'd been focused on justice for myself and protection for other potential victims in our family. I hadn't imagined that my personal decision would contribute to stopping a much larger criminal enterprise. That evening, I called Detective Hayes to ask about the broader investigation David had mentioned. She confirmed that my case had indeed been crucial to identifying and stopping the criminal network Jessica had been part of. Maya, your sister's documentation was incredibly detailed, and her cooperation with the investigation, even inadvertently, has helped us understand how these operations work. We've been able to prevent dozens of other crimes and arrest several other criminals. Jessica cooperated with the investigation. Not intentionally. But her detailed records of her criminal activities, combined with her correspondence with other criminals, gave us a roadmap to the entire operation. Hayes explained that Jessica's obsessive documentation, which had seemed like arrogance during her trial, had actually been part of the training she'd received from the criminal organization. They required detailed records to ensure their criminal techniques were being properly implemented. It's ironic, Hayes said. Jessica's pride in her criminal sophistication is what gave us the evidence to destroy the entire network. How is she adjusting to prison? According to the reports I receive, she's struggling. Federal prison is very different from the luxury lifestyle she was living on your stolen money. She's also discovering that other inmates don't have much sympathy for someone who stole from their unconscious sister. I felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that consequences were being appropriately experienced. Jessica was learning what it meant to live without the luxury funded by other people's destroyed trust and financial security. Detective, do you think she'll serve her full sentence? Probably not the full 22 years, but with federal crimes and her lack of remorse during sentencing, she'll serve at least 18 years. She'll be in her mid-40s when she's released. And the restitution payments. She'll be required to pay those for the rest of her life, regardless of when she's released from prison. Her future income will be garnished until the debt is fully satisfied. After Hayes hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, processing the scope of everything that had unfolded since that morning, when I'd discovered Jessica's vacation photos. A criminal network dismantled, multiple families protected from financial destruction. Hospital policies changed to protect vulnerable patients. A journalist working to educate the public about family member fraud. All because I'd decided to treat Jessica like the criminal she was instead of the sister I'd wanted her to remain. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Aunt Linda stood at my door, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. We hadn't spoken since the trial, when she'd made it clear that she believed I'd destroyed our family by refusing to handle Jessica's crimes privately. Maya, may I come in? I stepped aside, and Linda entered my apartment with the careful movements of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. She looked around at my modest furnishings. The evidence of a life being rebuilt from scratch. I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. Several apologies, actually. I gestured toward the couch, and we sat facing each other with the weight of months of silence between us. Linda, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I owe you an apology for not believing you about the scope of Jessica's crimes. I owe you an apology for pressuring you to drop the charges. And I owe you an apology for choosing to protect someone who was actively destroying our family. Linda's voice cracked as she continued. I got a call from the FBI yesterday. They wanted to interview me about money I'd given Jessica over the past year. Maya, she stole over $6,000 from me using stories about helping you. I'm sorry, Linda. Don't apologize. You tried to warn me, and I chose not to listen because it was easier to believe you were being vindictive than to accept that Jessica was a criminal. Linda explained that the FBI investigation had revealed the full scope of Jessica's theft from extended family members. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone who'd trusted her with financial information or given her money based on her lies about family emergencies. She used your accident, your recovery, your medical bills as reasons to extract money from everyone who loved you. While we thought we were helping you, we were actually funding her criminal lifestyle. How much did she steal from the family total? Over $20,000.
From people who could barely afford to help but did it anyway, because they thought you needed it. The number hit me like a physical blow. Jessica hadn't just stolen from me directly. She'd used my medical crisis to manipulate our entire extended family into giving her money they thought was going to help me. Linda, I didn't know.
How could you?
You were fighting for your life in the hospital while she was systematically lying to everyone who cared about you. We talked for over an hour. Linda apologizing repeatedly for not supporting me during the trial, for choosing Jessica's version of events over the documented evidence, for allowing family loyalty to override basic moral judgment. Maya, I need you to know that you did the right thing. The only right thing. If you hadn't pressed charges, Jessica would have destroyed all of us eventually. It still cost us our family unity. No, Jessica cost us our family unity when she decided to become a criminal. You just revealed what she'd already destroyed. When Linda left, she hugged me tightly and promised to help repair the relationships Jessica's crimes had damaged. It was a start, though I knew it would take years to fully rebuild the trust and connections that had been shattered. That weekend, I met with journalist Jennifer Walsh for the interview about family member fraud. We sat in a quiet coffee shop, and she asked thoughtful questions about recognizing warning signs, protecting personal information, and finding the strength to seek help when family members commit crimes. Maya, what would you want people to know about family member fraud that they might not realize? That it's not about the money, I said after thinking carefully. It's about the relationship. When someone steals from their own family, they're not just taking money. They're destroying trust, security, and the basic foundation of what family relationships mean. What advice would you give to someone who discovers a family member has stolen from them? Don't try to handle it privately. Family member fraud isn't a family problem, it's a criminal problem. Treating it like a family dispute only enables the criminal to continue victimizing people. Walsh's article was published 3 weeks later, and the response was overwhelming. I received dozens of emails from people who'd experienced similar crimes, thanking me for speaking publicly about something that most people handle in shame and silence. One email particularly stood out, from a woman in Colorado whose brother had stolen her identity during her cancer treatment. Reading your story gave me the courage to press charges, she wrote. I thought I was being vindictive, but now I understand I'm being protective. Another came from a man whose daughter had used his medical emergency to steal from his retirement accounts. I kept thinking family should forgive family, but your story helped me understand that some actions destroy the family relationship itself. The emails continued for months, each one representing someone who'd found the strength to seek justice instead of enabling criminal behavior. I began to understand that my decision to prosecute Jessica had created ripples far beyond my personal situation. 1 year after Jessica's sentencing, I received a letter forwarded through the prison system. Jessica's handwriting on the envelope, but my name and address written in the careful script of someone who'd lost the right to casual communication. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. Maya, the letter began. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to try to explain. The letter was 4 pages long, filled with Jessica's attempts to justify her crimes, blame others for her choices, and minimize the impact of her actions. She claimed she'd been manipulated by the criminal organization, that she'd never intended to hurt me, that prison was teaching her important lessons about personal responsibility. But the letter revealed something more important than Jessica's continued self-deception. It revealed that she still didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She was sorry about getting caught, sorry about going to prison, sorry about the family consequences. But she wasn't sorry about the crime itself. I hope someday you can forgive me, the letter concluded, and that we can be sisters again when I get out. I read the letter twice, then put it in the trash. Jessica could serve her sentence, complete her rehabilitation programs, and learn whatever lessons prison had to offer. But she would never be my sister again. That relationship had died the moment she decided to use my medical crisis as an opportunity for theft. Some choices can't be undone with apologies or rehabilitation. Some trust, once broken, can't be repaired. Jessica had made her choice when she prioritized her luxury lifestyle over my financial security and recovery. Now she would live with the consequences of that choice for the rest of her life. 2 years after the trial, I was promoted to senior accountant at my firm, with a salary that finally allowed me to start rebuilding my savings account. My credit score had recovered to acceptable levels, and I was approved for a mortgage on a small house in a quiet neighborhood where I could build a life free from the shadow of Jessica's betrayal. The house came with a garden that had been neglected by the previous owners. I spent weekends restoring it, planting vegetables and flowers, creating something beautiful from ground that had been left barren. There was something deeply satisfying about the work, about nurturing growth from soil that had been abandoned. Detective Hayes called occasionally with updates about the ongoing federal cases related to Jessica's criminal network. The investigation had expanded to cover multiple states and resulted in over 30 arrests. Hundreds of families had been protected from financial destruction because of evidence recovered from Jessica's documentation. Maya, you should know that your case has become a training example for law enforcement agencies across the country, Hayes told me during one of our conversations. Your decision to pursue justice instead of family peace has helped develop new protocols for investigating family member fraud. I never intended to change law enforcement protocols. I just wanted Jessica to face consequences for what she did. And by doing that, you've helped protect countless other families from similar crimes. The ripple effects of courage are hard to measure, but they're real. 5 years after Jessica's sentencing, I received notification that she'd been denied early parole. The parole board cited her continued lack of remorse and her failure to take responsibility for the full scope of her crimes. She would serve at least another 5 years before becoming eligible for parole again. I felt no satisfaction at this news, but also no sympathy. Jessica had been given multiple opportunities to demonstrate genuine remorse and understanding of her crimes. Her continued self-justification and blame-shifting showed that prison hadn't changed her fundamental character. That evening, I called Uncle David to share the news. He'd remained my strongest family ally throughout the years since the trial, helping to slowly rebuild relationships with relatives who'd eventually accepted that Jessica was a criminal, rather than a victim of circumstances. How do you feel about Jessica being denied parole? He asked. I feel like the parole board made the right decision. Someone who still doesn't understand why stealing from their unconscious sister was wrong isn't ready to be released back into society. Any regrets about how you handled everything? I considered his question carefully, thinking about the family relationships that had been permanently damaged, the years of legal proceedings and financial recovery, the ongoing impact of Jessica's crimes on everyone who trusted her. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. I regret that Jessica chose to become someone who would steal from her unconscious sister. But I don't regret choosing justice over enabling criminal behavior. Good, David said. Because you saved a lot of people from becoming Jessica's victims, including people you'll never meet. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my small house, filled with furniture I'd bought honestly, books I'd purchased with money I'd earned, plants I'd nurtured with my own hands. Everything in my life was real, earned, authentic in a way that Jessica's stolen luxury had never been. The phone rang one more time that evening. Jennifer Walsh, the journalist who'd interviewed me years earlier. Maya, I wanted to let you know that the series of articles about family member fraud, including your story, has been nominated for a journalism award. The judges said the series helped raise awareness about a hidden crime that was destroying families across the country. That's wonderful, Jennifer. I'm glad the story helped people. Actually, I'm calling because I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to speak at the awards ceremony. They'd like to recognize the courage it took to speak publicly about something so personal and painful. I agreed to speak at the ceremony, though I wasn't sure what I'd say. What do you tell people about finding the strength to treat family members like the criminals they've chosen to become? At the ceremony 6 months later, I stood before an audience of journalists, law enforcement officials, and advocacy groups, looking out at faces that represented people who spent their careers seeking truth and justice. When I discovered my sister had stolen my identity while I was unconscious in the hospital, I began. I faced a choice that I think many people in similar situations face. I could handle it privately, within the family, hoping that love and forgiveness would somehow fix what had been broken. Or I could treat her like the criminal she'd chosen to become. I talked about the pressure to choose family loyalty over personal justice, the difficulty of accepting that someone you love has become someone who would destroy your life for personal gain, the strength required to seek help instead of suffering in silence. Family member fraud is different from other crimes because it exploits our deepest relationships, I continued. The people who commit these crimes count on our love, our loyalty, our reluctance to destroy family connections. They use our own values against us. The audience was completely quiet as I described the choice between enabling criminal behavior and protecting future victims, between preserving family peace and pursuing actual justice. In the end, I learned that family loyalty doesn't mean protecting people from the consequences of their choices. It means loving them enough to refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when that refusal comes at a tremendous personal cost. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached me with their own stories of family member fraud, theft, and betrayal. Each story was different in its details, but similar in its core elements: trust exploited, relationships destroyed, victims struggling with the choice between family loyalty and personal protection. "Thank you for showing us that it's possible to choose justice," one woman told me. "My son stole my retirement savings, and I've been trying to handle it privately for 2 years. Your story helped me understand that I'm not protecting him, I'm enabling him." Another man shared that his brother had used his identity to finance a drug habit, destroying his credit and reputation. "I kept thinking I was being vindictive by pressing charges, but your speech helped me realize I was being protective." The conversations continued late into the evening, each one reinforcing the lesson I'd learned through my own painful experience. Silence protects criminals, and family loyalty doesn't require enabling criminal behavior. 10 years after Jessica's arrest, I received a letter from the prison system informing me that she'd been granted parole and would be released in 6 months. The letter included information about victim notification services and restraining orders, standard protocols for ensuring victim safety when criminals are released. I didn't pursue any additional legal protections. Jessica would be in her late 30s when she was released, required to find employment despite a federal fraud conviction, obligated to pay restitution for the rest of her life. She'd spent a decade in federal prison, losing her 20s and early 30s to the consequences of her criminal choices. Her release didn't change anything for me. I'd built a life based on honesty, hard work, and authentic relationships. Whatever life Jessica built after prison would be her responsibility, just as the criminal life she'd built before prison had been her choice. 6 months later, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, Jessica's voice came through the line, older and more tired than I remembered. "Maya, it's me. I wanted to let you know I've been released, and I wanted to apologize for everything I did. Jessica, I appreciate the call, but I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I've had 10 years to think about what I did, and I understand now how wrong I was. Do you? Do you understand that you used my medical crisis as an opportunity to steal from me? Do you understand that you documented our relatives' financial vulnerabilities so you could steal from them too? Do you understand that you were training other people to commit the same crimes?" The silence stretched between us before Jessica spoke again, her voice smaller. "I understand that I hurt you, and I'm sorry." "That's not an understanding, Jessica. That's just an acknowledgement that there were consequences for your actions." "What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to build whatever life you can build now, and leave me out of it." "Maya, we're family." "No, we're not. We're strangers who used to be family before you chose to become a criminal who targeted me specifically." I hung up and blocked the number. Whatever relationship Jessica and I had once shared had ended the moment she decided my unconscious body was an opportunity rather than a tragedy. 10 years in prison hadn't changed that fundamental reality. But blocking Jessica's number didn't block the flood of emotions that came with hearing her voice again. Not anger, exactly, but a profound sadness for what had been lost, and what could never be recovered. Jessica had chosen to destroy our relationship along with my financial security, and that destruction was permanent regardless of her eventual release from prison. That evening, I called Uncle David to let him know about Jessica's attempted contact. He listened quietly as I described the conversation, the attempted apology, the continued sense that Jessica didn't truly understand the scope of what she'd done. "How do you feel about her being out of prison?" he asked. "I feel like justice was served. She served her time, and now she has to build whatever life she can build with a federal conviction and a lifetime of restitution payments. That's not my concern anymore." And the family relationships. The family that was worth keeping stood by me when I chose justice over enabling criminal behavior. The family that wasn't worth keeping revealed themselves during the trial. David was quiet for a moment. "Maya, I'm proud of you. 10 years ago, and today, you chose the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing, and you've never wavered from that choice. It was the only choice that protected future victims. And it was the choice that taught our entire family that love doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior." After we hung up, I walked through my house, looking at the life I'd built through honest work and careful choices. Every possession had been earned legitimately. Every relationship was based on mutual respect and trust. Every achievement was the result of my own efforts, rather than someone else's exploitation. Jessica was free to build whatever life she could manage with the consequences of her criminal choices. But she would build it without access to my trust, my financial information, or my emotional investment. I'd learned to distinguish between family loyalty and criminal enablement, and that distinction had protected not just me, but countless other potential victims. The phone rang one more time that night. Detective Hayes, now retired but still in touch occasionally. Maya, I heard Jessica was released. How are you handling it? I'm handling it by remembering that justice was served, and my life is built on honesty instead of theft. Good. You know your case is still being used to train new detectives and financial crimes units across the country. Really, your decision to pursue justice instead of family peace created a template for how these cases should be handled. You showed that victims can choose accountability over enablement, even when the criminal is a family member. I just wanted Jessica to face consequences for what she did. And by wanting that, you helped create a world where other families are protected from similar crimes. After Hayes hung up, I sat in my garden as the sun set over the mountains, surrounded by plants I'd nurtured from seeds, in a house I'd bought with money I'd earned. Honestly, living a life built on choices I could defend with pride. Jessica was somewhere out there, trying to build a life with the consequences of her criminal choices. The luxury apartment was gone, the BMW was gone, the designer clothes were gone. What remained was a federal conviction, a lifetime of restitution payments, and the knowledge that her own family had chosen justice over loyalty when she revealed herself to be a predator. Some people would say I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving, too willing to destroy family relationships for the sake of principle. But those people hadn't woken up in intensive care to discover that their sister had used their medical crisis as an opportunity for theft. They hadn't spent years rebuilding credit destroyed by someone they'd trusted completely. They hadn't learned that someone they loved had been documenting their financial vulnerabilities and planning their destruction. Family loyalty works both ways. Jessica had chosen to break that loyalty when she decided my unconscious body was an opportunity rather than a tragedy. I'd chosen to honor it by making sure she faced consequences that matched her crimes, and never had the opportunity to destroy another family the way she'd tried to destroy ours. In the end, that choice had protected people I'd never meet, changed policies that would protect future victims, and created a life I could live with pride instead of shame. That was enough. That would always be enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.